Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this question before you answer. When someone asks you, "How are you doing?" how often do you say busy? How often does that word just fall out of your mouth almost automatically? Busy, slammed, grinding, no days off. And here is what I find fascinating about that. We don't say busy with exhaustion anymore. We say it with pride. We say it like it is a medal pinned to our chest. Like the more hours we log, the more calls we take, the more plates we spin, the more worthy we become. Somewhere in the last decade, hustle stopped being a strategy and became an identity. Social media turned it into a religion. Sleep is for the weak. Your dreams don't have an off switch. Rise and grind. These phrases sound motivating on the surface, but beneath them lies something much darker that nobody really wants to talk about. Today, that is exactly what we are going to talk about. We are going to go deep into what happens when hustle stops fueling you and starts consuming you, when ambition curdles into anxiety, when trying harder stops working and starts hurting, when the very thing you thought was the answer becomes the problem. This is not a conversation against hard work. I want to be clear about that up front. Hard work is real. Discipline matters. Effort is non-negotiable. But there is a threshold, and most high achievers blow past it so fast they don't even notice they crossed it, and by the time they do, they've already done damage. So let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about where the hustle mythology comes from and why it hooks so many brilliant, capable people. The mythology of more. Every generation has its mythology of success. In some eras it was noble birth, in others divine favor. For a time it was formal education. Get the degree, get the job, retire with the pension. But somewhere in the late 20th century, something shifted. The mythology changed. The new mythology became this. If you are not where you want to be, you are simply not trying hard enough. Success is not luck. It is not circumstance. It is pure, raw effort. And any gap between where you are and where you want to be is a personal failing, a willpower deficit. Now there is something seductive about that belief, isn't there? Because it means success is fully in your control. You don't have to factor in systemic barriers or timing or privilege or chance. You just have to want it enough, work hard enough, sacrifice enough. And so we started optimizing every hour, waking up at 4 a.m. because successful people wake up at 4 a.m., scheduling every minute, reading productivity books on the commute, turning hobbies into side hustles, turning rest into a problem to be solved. Sleep became optimized, not rested, optimized. I want to tell you about a concept from psychology that I think explains a lot of what happens here. It is called the effort-outcome fallacy, the deep-seated belief that more effort always equals better outcomes. And in many domains of life, that is true enough to be reinforcing. Study more, score better on the exam, practice more, improve at the sport, work longer, finish the project. But this relationship between effort and outcomes is not infinite. It is not a straight line going upward forever. It is a curve. And past a certain point, and this is the part we never talk about, past that peak, more effort produces diminishing returns, and then negative returns. More trying actually produces worse outcomes. You've heard of the Yerkes-Dodson law. Maybe not by name, but you've felt it. It says that performance increases with arousal and effort, but only up to a point. Beyond that point, performance drops. A surgeon, under moderate pressure, performs well. A surgeon under extreme chronic stress starts making errors. A student who cares about the test does better than one who doesn't. But a student paralyzed with anxiety about the test, they blank, they choke. This is the first crack in the mythology of more. Effort has a ceiling, and the hustle culture we've built doesn't acknowledge that ceiling exists. What overtrying actually looks like. So, what does overtrying actually look like? Because here is the tricky part. It rarely looks like trying too hard from the outside. From the outside, it often looks like incredible dedication. It looks like someone who really cares. And that makes it very hard to see clearly, especially when you are the one doing it. Let me paint a picture. You probably know someone like this. Maybe it is you. This is the person who cannot take a day off without guilt clawing at them the entire time. The person who checks their phone 17 times during dinner. The person who says, "I'll sleep when I'm dead," not as a joke, but as a genuine philosophy of life. The person who has turned their entire identity into their productivity. They are not lazy. They are not lacking discipline. They are in many ways exceptional. But something has gone wrong in the relationship between their effort and their well-being. Their ambition has become untethered from any sense of enough. Here are some specific patterns I want you to watch for, in yourself, in people you lead, in people you love. The first is the inability to rest without anxiety. True rest, the kind that restores you, becomes almost impossible. You sit down to relax, and your mind immediately starts cataloging everything you should be doing instead. Rest stops feeling like recovery. It starts feeling like failure. The second is decision fatigue disguised as productivity. When you are chronically overtrying, the quality of your thinking deteriorates, even as the quantity of your activity increases. You become busy but not effective. You are running at maximum capacity, but your outputs reflect the exhaustion underneath. The third is resentment toward others who rest. This one is subtle and a little embarrassing to admit. When you have sacrificed everything at the altar of your goals, watching other people take breaks or seem unbothered starts to feel like an injustice. You start judging people who rest, not because they are doing something wrong, but because they remind you of something you've lost. The fourth is goalposts that never stop moving. This is perhaps the most insidious pattern. You hit the target, and instead of pausing to feel that success, instead of letting it land, you immediately move the target further away. The launch is successful, but you are already obsessing over the next one. The promotion comes through, and before the email is even read, you are thinking about the next rung. Nothing is ever enough, and if nothing is ever enough, no amount of effort will ever feel like enough. These are not signs of greatness. These are signs that something has broken in the relationship between you and your work. The biology of burning out. Now, I want to talk about what is actually happening inside your body and brain when you push past sustainable limits, because this is not soft or metaphorical. This is biology, and your biology does not care about your hustle goals. When you face a challenge, a deadline, a competition, a difficult conversation, your body activates the stress response. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your system. Your heart rate increases. Blood flows to your muscles, and your prefrontal cortex, the decision-making part of your brain, gets a boost. You are sharp, focused, ready. This is healthy. This is the stress response working exactly as it should. Short-term, targeted, purposeful stress is not bad for you. It makes you better. The problem is chronic stress. The problem is when the stress response never turns off. When the cortisol tap never closes. When your body is living in a permanent state of high alert because you have told it, through your behavior, that there is always something urgent, always something at stake, always something that requires maximum effort. What chronic stress does to the brain is not pretty. Long-term elevated cortisol actually shrinks the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for memory and learning. It impairs the prefrontal cortex, your judgment, your impulse control, your ability to think clearly. It hyperactivates the amygdala, your threat detection system, making you more reactive, more anxious, more prone to seeing danger where none exists. And then comes the physical toll. Immune suppression, elevated blood pressure, disrupted sleep. And we know that sleep deprivation alone mimics the cognitive effects of being significantly impaired. Digestive problems, cardiovascular risk. The body keeps the score. You cannot treat yourself as a machine and be surprised when you start breaking down like one. Burnout, real clinical burnout, is not just being tired. It is a state of profound exhaustion that does not respond to a weekend off. It is emotional detachment. It is cynicism creeping in where passion used to live. It is the feeling of being simultaneously wired and hollow. And once you are truly there, recovery takes months, sometimes years, and it can permanently alter your relationship with work. I want to be really direct here. The culture tells you that pushing through is strength, that rest is weakness, but your neurobiology disagrees. Your brain requires downtime, not as a luxury, but as a functional necessity. During rest, during sleep, during periods of low stimulation, The brain consolidates learning, processes emotions, clears metabolic waste, and prepares for the next round of effort. You cannot hustle your way past your own neurobiology. The people who try learn this the hard way. The identity trap. I want to go a little deeper now because the biology matters, but the psychology might matter even more. And the psychological dimension of toxic hustle is this. What happens when your productivity becomes your identity? This is the identity trap, and it is far more common than people realize. Here is how it develops. You start working hard because you want to achieve something, a goal, a dream, a standard of living. The hard work produces results. The results produce praise, recognition, a sense of meaning. The praise feels good, so you work harder. More praise, more recognition. You start to build your self-image around being someone who works hard, who achieves, who delivers. And now something subtle but critical happens. The work is no longer separate from who you are. The work is who you are. Your productivity is your self-worth. Your output is your value as a human being. And from that point forward, any threat to your productivity is a threat to your identity. Rest is not just unproductive, it is existentially threatening. Failure is not just a setback, it is evidence that you are not enough. A bad day at work is not just a bad day, it is a crisis of self. This is why high achievers are often so brittle. On the outside, they look like the most capable, confident people in the room. But internally, the whole structure is built on a foundation of, I am only as good as what I produce. And that foundation is fragile. Because output fluctuates, circumstances change, you get sick, the market shifts, and when your output drops, the whole sense of self threatens to come with it. There is a concept in psychology called contingent self-worth. The idea that your sense of value depends entirely on external conditions. When you are winning, you feel good about yourself. When you are not, you don't. And people with highly contingent self-worth tied to performance are extraordinarily vulnerable to anxiety, depression, and compulsive overwork. The hustle culture actually exploits this vulnerability. It says, your worth is your output, and if you are not enough yet, work more, work harder, work longer. There is always another level. There is always someone ahead of you. There is always more to prove. Breaking the identity trap requires something that hustle culture never talks about. Building a sense of self-worth that is unconditional. That exists regardless of what you produce. That does not expand and contract with your output. This is not soft. This is not settling. It is, in fact, the foundation of sustainable performance. The best athletes, the best artists, the best leaders, they separate their identity from any single performance. They can lose and still know who they are. The paradox of over-trying. Here is one of the great paradoxes at the heart of this conversation. The more desperately you try to force outcomes, the less likely you often are to achieve them. We see this in sports constantly. The golfer who needs to make the putt and overtries, tenses up, grips the club too hard, overthinks the mechanics, misses a putt they've made 1,000 times in practice. The basketball player at the free throw line in the final second, the singer who performed the song perfectly in rehearsal but freezes under the lights. Psychologists call this paralysis by analysis, when conscious effort actually interferes with unconscious competence. Your brain has automated certain skills and processes. When you try to consciously control them too much, you actually hijack the automatic system that was working perfectly well on its own. But it goes even further than that. Think about human relationships. Have you ever wanted something from someone so desperately, approval, love, a deal, a friendship, that your desperation itself became the barrier? You tried too hard and they could feel it and it pushed them away? Or think about creativity. The more you strain to have an idea, the more the ideas hide. The best insights almost always come in the shower, on a walk, half asleep, never when you are hunched over your desk at 2 a.m. forcing it. There is a concept from Eastern philosophy called Wu Wei, effortless action. The idea is not passivity. It is not doing nothing. It is aligning yourself with the natural flow of things rather than forcing against it. It is the difference between swimming with the current and exhausting yourself against it. High-performance research actually reflects this. The concept of flow, studied extensively by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, describes the optimal performance state. And do you know what characterizes flow? It is not maximum effort. It is effortful ease. It is full engagement without self-consciousness. It is trying and not trying at the same time. You cannot force your way into flow. You create the conditions for it, and then you get out of your own way. The clutching, grasping, grinding energy of toxic hustle is the opposite of flow. It actually prevents the very state you are working so hard to reach. This is not mysticism. This is high-performance science, and it tells us that there is a quality of effort, a lightness, an openness, a state of engaged relaxation that is fundamentally different from the contracted, fearful, desperate trying that hustle culture has normalized. The culture we built and the cost we pay. I want to zoom out for a moment, because this is not just a personal issue, it is a cultural issue, and the costs are being paid at scale. We have built workplaces that treat chronic overwork as a virtue, industries that celebrate 80-hour weeks, startup cultures that normalize sleeping in the office, academic environments that equate struggling to rest with intellectual passion, parenting cultures that schedule every hour of a child's life because idle time feels wasteful. We have taught our children that busyness is goodness, that rest is laziness, that your value lies in your productivity, and the data tells us what this costs. Rates of anxiety disorder, particularly among young adults, have risen dramatically over the past 2 decades. Depression, loneliness, and burnout are at historic levels across many developed economies. The World Health Organization has formally recognized burnout as an occupational phenomenon. The financial toll of workplace stress runs into the hundreds of billions annually. In absenteeism, lost productivity, and healthcare costs. And perhaps most painfully, many of the people suffering most acutely are the ones who care the most, the ones who tried the hardest, the teachers who gave everything to their students and collapsed, the doctors who sacrificed their own health to serve others, the entrepreneurs who poured their entire being into a dream. This is not a failure of willpower. This is a failure of culture, a culture that tells people to pour from an empty cup, a culture that has confused motion with progress, activity with meaning, and exhaustion with dedication. And here is something I want you to really consider. The most innovative organizations on Earth, the ones doing the most genuinely groundbreaking work, have largely moved away from grinding culture. They have invested in psychological safety, recovery time, creative space, and autonomy, because they figured out what the data has been telling us for decades. A rested, psychologically safe, intrinsically motivated human being dramatically outperforms a burned-out, anxious, externally pressured one every single time. The smartest organizations are not demanding more hustle. They are demanding more wisdom about how to sustain peak performance over the long run, and the gap between those two approaches is enormous. A different way, intentional effort. So what is the alternative? If the answer is not hustle culture, and it is also clearly not laziness or complacency, what is it? I call it intentional effort, and it is different from hustle in every important way. Intentional effort asks, what is the smallest amount of high-quality effort that produces the outcome I actually care about? Not the maximum effort, not the most impressive-sounding effort, the most effective effort. It treats your energy as a finite and precious resource, not something to be depleted as a form of dedication, but something to be invested strategically. Intentional effort includes rest, not as a reward for effort, but as a component of effort. The rest is not separate from the work. The rest is part of how the work gets done. Recovery is part of the performance cycle. You cannot keep withdrawing from the account without making deposits. Intentional effort is anchored in values, not fear. Hustle culture is often fear-based. Fear of falling behind, fear of not being enough, fear of what others will think. Intentional effort is love-based. You do the work because it matters to you, because it aligns with what you actually value, because it connects to something larger than the next metric. Intentional effort knows when to stop, and this is perhaps the hardest skill to develop in a culture that glorifies never stopping. Knowing when you've done enough for today, when more hours will produce worse work, when the most productive thing you can do is put it down and come back tomorrow with fresh eyes. I want to leave you with this. The most extraordinary performers in any field, athletes, artists, scientists, leaders, they are not distinguished by working more than everyone else. They are distinguished by working better, by knowing when to push and when to recover, by having the self-awareness to understand their own rhythms, by building a relationship with their work that is sustainable across decades, not a sprint that burns out in years. Your dreams are worth protecting. Your goals are worth pursuing. But so is your health. So is your joy. So are your relationships. So is the version of yourself that exists outside of what you produce. Hustle is a tool, a powerful one, but tools should serve you, not the other way around. The moment your hustle starts costing more than it creates, it has stopped being a strategy and become a problem. Work hard, rest unapologetically, know your worth beyond your output, and stop wearing exhaustion as a badge of honor. Thank you.